So what'd you get up to today?
Well, I went to the vet with the dog to get her bum squeezed out.
Amazing, me too. I had my dog's anal glands expressed. What are the chances that two people have had such an unusual thing happen to them on the same day?
Well, the thing is, firstly, it's not that unusual. It's a good idea to get your dog's bum done every
No,
so often.
I think it is unusual. Okay, let's try this again. What did you have for dinner today?
I had curry,
What kind of curry?
Rogan Josh, and a dal,
I had a Rogan Josh and a dal too. What did you have for sides?
poppadoms, and naan.
What kind of naan?
Oh my gosh, garlic naan.
Ah, see, that's where it went wrong. I had keema naan.
Because that's what. Because Efka, it's not that unusual when two people live in the same house for them to share a meal and also to take their dog to the vet together.
You're ruining it. You're ruining it. What are you doing right now?
What am I doing? I'm recording a podcast
About
with board games.
what a coincidence. Me too. Shall we talk about board games?
Welcome to Talk Cardboard, a podcast about board games and everything adjacent with me, Elaine, and you.
Me, Efka.
On today's episode, we'll be saving our civilizations from disaster in Empire's End, heading to the races in Ready, Set, Bet, and fitting Tetris-shaped emotions into our brains in Mindspace. Plus, we have an interview with Rob Daviau. First, though, Dustin has emailed in with this. I was today years old when I realised that the review I watched almost 2 years ago was for a game that doesn't exist. I thought at the time that it looked interesting and worth looking into, but I never did. The YouTube algorithm got me. But your discussion on Singapore 1819 left me thinking about the artistic merits of board games as perceived by the wider world. I wonder if a fictional board game made by an artist warrants placement in a museum. Would it have if that game was instead real? I see incredible value in mechanical representation of historical events that approach subjects with nuance and an eye towards accuracy. Tory Brown's votes for women, Taylor Schuss's Stonewall Uprising, and Amabel Holland's Endurance could all be pieces in similar exhibits, but I wonder if the fact that they are products somehow diminishes their value, in at least the eyes of some, to the point that a fictional board game surpasses the merits of otherwise real games.
Well, that's actually quite funny because oftentimes I feel like with these more elaborate idea games, I am more interested in experiencing them rather than like coming back to them. Does that make sense? You know, my stance on Food Chain Magnet is that I think it's a fantastic game that I want to play once in my life and then that's it. I'm done, you know? And it's similar to, in that way, a museum exhibit because, you know, you go to a museum exhibit, very rarely do you want to return, you know? Like, I've appreciated Dali's lobster phone, but do I really need to see it again?
I really like the lobster phone. I mean, I'd quite like to see that again. But that's why you have quite a lot of exhibits that travel around. You have, like, special exhibits, don't you, that come up. Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
So, yeah, I maybe I agree a little bit, actually, that maybe the fact that it isn't a real product, it is somehow elevated. That's very interesting.
Let's move on to our first game. Empire's End comes from Brotherwise Games by designer John D. Clare with art by Kwanchai Moria.
Well, talking of games that you only want to experience once.
Yeah, but not, yeah.
You said that. Those were your words. I never need to play this again.
I did say that, yeah.
Yeah. In our defense, in your defense, because actually I quite liked it, we have another John D. Clare game on the podcast today, and you like that a lot more. Spoilers ahead. So,
yeah.
But yes, you were not a fan. Can you briefly, succinctly describe the concept of what Empire's End is trying to do and why that didn't gel with you?
You're trying to stop your city from being destroyed. Every round there is some kind of disastrous event that is potentially going to wipe part of your city out, and you are bidding some amount of food or other resource in order to not have your part of the city destroyed and for someone else to have their part of the city destroyed instead.
Someone's going to have it destroyed, right?
Someone is going to have it destroyed.
And what was it about that really didn't...
Well, you know how I feel about bidding anyway. I'm not great at knowing how much to bid. So that's never something that makes me feel relaxed in a game. But also, it felt like some kind of racketeering job. Like a part of your city will get destroyed unless you pay us.
Yeah.
Like that, it felt like that, and it was just not a chill game. And
it wasn't a chill game, was it?
no.
No.
And I like in games where you build up your city and you go, oh, now I've got this or that or whatever. And this was like, well, you've got this, just don't lose it.
Yeah. So this is kind of a weird game. I think we're sort of burying the lead. There's one important aspect of this that I think might get people excited right now. So Empire's End is no thanks the Euro game.
Yeah.
And if that pitch sounds weird and kind of exciting, I think there's something there. I'm not sure this game sings as much as it needs to, but also we've only played it at 3 players, and I think the ideal environment for this game is like
More
4 players only. Yeah. But yes, the idea, if you've played No Thanks, you'll know how this goes.
Which my parents call fuff that.
Except not
No,
foof.
except not
Yeah.
foof.
Yeah. But it is precisely that. It's like, I don't want this. How much money do I need to pay to not have it, right? And the way it works in No Thanks, and very similarly in Empire's End, is that, you have a thing in front of you, and you need to put like a resource or a pip on it to pass it on to the next person, right? In Empire's End, you have 3 types of resources. You have wheat, swords, and hammers. And so some disasters, when you draw a random disaster, they'll only have wheat. Some will only have hammers. Some might have hammers and wheat or whatever. So these are the eligible resources that you can put on this disaster to pass it on to the next person. But then whoever takes the disaster and goes, yeah, okay, I'll take it, they take all the stuff that was put on it. So sometimes you might be planning to take it. You go, yeah, okay, I'm actually fine with that. Yeah, it's not that bad, right? But you just put something on it to pass it along, to milk out more from other people, because it would be really bad for them. And the way that's facilitated is via this kind of bizarre mechanism that didn't always work for me. Basically, anytime you draw a disaster tile that says it's going to destroy a part of your city, right? It has a number on it. And your city is basically just 11 tiles. Ordered in a numerical order. So each are in a numbered slot. So, your like city tile, for example, that's worth 32 points, which is the most out of all the tiles. And it's only worth that if it doesn't get destroyed. Might be in number 3 when you start the game,
and
right?
that's randomly decided at the beginning of the game.
Yeah,
where those tiles are going to be.
But it's the same for everyone, right? So if the very first disaster tile we draw is number 3, everyone is bidding money to not have their city destroyed. But as the game goes along, various effects shuffle your city around, and so what number 3 means to me might not anymore mean to you, right? So it's entirely possible that someone might be like entirely cool to take it because they're the only person who doesn't have their city in number 3 and everyone else does. And in that position, you can just keep swinging it around, right? Going, have that destroyed.
And then you go to the production phase again and you realize that, you've destroyed everything that produces anything because you thought it didn't matter, but it did. And now you can't make any more resources, and so you're stuffed.
Yeah, and this is the other weird thing about Empires, and unlike No Thanks, where it's just this like ruthless bidding, there are different types of rounds that keep happening based on this sort of snake track, and that snake track is basically the game clock, which says now is a disaster phase, now is a production phase, now is an industry phase, etc., etc. And so different things might be happening on a different round. Sometimes you'll just be bidding. Sometimes you'll be getting resources. Sometimes you'll be repairing your city because you have a chance to repair something that's destroyed, although it is exorbitantly expensive. And the final kind of icing on the cake that makes Empire's End exciting is that when you take a disaster, when you go, yeah, okay, I'm passing on the bidding, I'm taking all the resources, you also take that disaster tile and then it becomes an upgrade for one of your healthy tiles. And then like there's all these kinds of weird mishmashy things where like the position of tiles matters, whether this is adjacent to the specific upgrade or not.
There are a lot of things interlocking with each other.
Yeah.
And it is very clever. I think I found it very clever. I just didn't get the vibe I wanted from a game that evening.
Yeah. Well, I saw you suffer. You were just sitting there and going like,
I don't want my village to die.
Yeah, like you were not enjoying yourself on any of the turns because
no, I at the beginning I said every round there is a disaster. That is not true. There is, but it feels like it does feel like, oh no, it's a disaster again. Okay.
Well, I mean, some rounds you have two disasters.
This is true.
And you have to bid on them separately. Like if they both get passed to you, you have to bid on one, right? And even if you and then bid on the other, and even if you take one of them, you still have to put something on the other one, right? Yeah. Which is just like, wait, didn't I already take something? I don't want this. The amount of like negative pressure this game exerts on your brain is spectacular, actually. I've never quite experienced anything so demoralizing.
Well, I mean, this city's being destroyed,
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess
it's the end of the empire.
Yeah, I think that's the mark of a good game because I don't think this game's going to be for everyone, right? But the feeling it evokes is really like no other game, you know, where it's just like bad stuff's going to happen. And it's, you know what? It's like watching Uncut Gems, right? Where you watch Adam Sandler do the worst, you know, kind of things to himself. Like he is asking for it this entire movie, and you go, well, it can't get any worse than that, right?
And then it does.
and it does. And again.
Every scene is a little bit worse than the last.
Yeah, so that's pretty much Empire's End.
That's how it feels.
And my experience of it. I think I wanted it to be a little bit more lenient because I got sort of an impression that there's some sort of a leverage, right? Okay, your city gets destroyed, but you get these bonus tiles. And like, you know, it might get, you know, kind of like, it might swing
balance
the other
out.
way. Yeah, like balance out, you know, where it's just like, no, it's just bad. It's just bad all the time. You do get something, but oftentimes it's like, the situation is so bad or you've mismanaged it so bad that it doesn't really leverage anything. It doesn't matter anymore. Like, I got this tile as an upgrade that said, oh, hey, 3 points for every one of your tiles that are destroyed at the end of the game. And it's like, is this a strategy? You know, can I be like a little bit more lenient? Well, no, because like the least amount of points you're going to get from a tile is 5 if it's alive, right? So up to 32.
I think it's a consolation prize.
Yeah, it's definitely a consolation prize more than anything else. You just
got the food mixer. You wanted the holiday to Greece, but you got the food mixer.
Oh, wow, this game. Anywho, I had fun and Elaine didn't, and I think you can decide for yourselves whether Empire's End is for you based on how much you enjoy being tortured on your board game night.
We had a discussion in a previous episode about Undaunted regarding alternative settings. A couple of people have written in to tell us about some games they think might interest us. Alta says, while you will presumably eagerly await the recently announced Undaunted 2200 Callisto, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that there is already a non-historical game by Mr. Thompson in circulation. And then they go on to give us a link for the game For What Remains. There's some skirmish games. There are a set of skirmish games which are set in a post-apocalyptic near future.
Oh, okay.
So that's interesting.
It's a title I've heard about. I just didn't know anything about it. I will check it out. Thank you.
And Sebastian says, I'm currently enjoying listening to the backlog of your podcast. In the episode where you discuss Undaunted Battle of Britain, you mentioned wanting to play a war game set on the home front, showing civilian life during wartime. I wanted to point you to a small but deeply emotional RPG called Blackout, a game of civil defence. You play as women volunteers in the civil defence of London during the Blitz. The game is designed for one-shots, simulating one difficult night of fighting fires, rescuing neighbours and defusing unexploded bombs. They also gave a link to the game.
Thank you for all these recommendations.
I know, right?
They sound very interesting. Yes.
I appreciate everyone letting us know about games that we might not have heard of. But if you have any games that you would like to tell us about, please let me know. Elaine@nopunincluded.com. Still to come, we have an interview with Rob Daviau and Mindspace. But now, coming in at number 2, just behind Empire's End, is Ready, Set, Bet. Ready, Set, Bet comes from publisher AEG by designer John D. Clare again, with art by Kirk W. Buckendorf and Athena Kagel. Or Kagel, I'm not sure, sorry.
Elaine, after this game, you have said to me, I want to play that again.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was so frantic. And so, do you want to tell us about it first?
Yeah, go on. Okay. I can tell you're excited, but I'll brief people in. So, Ready, Set, Bet is a game by John D. Clare, which is not like any other game I've played before. Surprise! Once again, this podcast, John D. Clare delivers us a new experience. It is a game about horse racing, boo, but a board game about horse racing, yay! And in this game, you bet on horses who are gonna win or come second or come third. If you've heard that concept before from numerous other games like Longshot, the Dice Game, or Winner's Circle, or Royal Turf, or what have you, yes, it's kind of like one of those. But unlike those, it's real time, baby.
Yeah, more than any of those other games, it felt like we were, I don't want to say in a betting shop because that sounds weird, but like actually doing this thing. The whole, apart from having like a tic-tac man doing all the
You got so excited, you dropped the script down.
Apart from having a tic-tac man doing all the arm movements, like it felt like we were actually betting on these horses because we used the app for it. And I think that is where the game shone.
Yes, it did. At one point, I was hammering the wall with my fist and yelling, no!
Yes, you were. You were. And we were going, come on, number 9, or whatever. You know, like it was really like, because we didn't know what was going to happen. Yeah. Like the dice were rolled for us on the app. And this nice gentleman did the sort of commentary of it, like coming in at number, you know, coming up from behind or whatever. And then suddenly, you know...
And by nice gentleman, you mean pre-recorded on the app.
Yeah, obviously it wasn't a real... I mean, it was a real person, but not in the room. And you know, just evoking like an atmosphere of a race. And I don't like horse racing. I think it's cruel and horrid, but I really like it in games. And this, like I said, you know, I think evokes the atmosphere of betting on horses or betting on something. It could have been, you know, spiders racing for, you know, it didn't really matter. But that kind of feeling of, come on, you know, than any other game I've played, I think.
It was incredible. It really somehow managed to get that out of us. And so, okay, so there's a couple of caveats before we go on, you know, being very effusive about this game. So this is a very strange kind of situation. This is definitely a party game, first of all, right? So I would only recommend this game if you frequently have lots of people over at your place.
Oh, you don't want to play it like 2-player, no.
No, yeah, and you know, people who are ready for like an experience type of game, right? So the second caveat, you should have a big... wherever you're playing, you should have a big TV screen or a projector or whatever, because you don't want to play this on the app just like on your phone or on your tablet. That just won't work, right? You need it projected in some way. We had it on, you know, we had it in our living room. We have a big telly screen there. We just, you know, put the app through the telly and it worked, right? It was brilliant. You also need a lot of people. And yeah, we had friends visiting. We had Tom from Shut Up and Sit Down. We had Carly Reinhardt as well from Gnarly Carly Games, who taught us Ready, Set, Bet. So thank you very much for that, Carly. And
you're just name dropping now.
Well, I am name dropping because, you know, I want to share it, like you know, oh god, no, it's digging my own hole.
Anyway, the game.
So yeah, games. Aren't they fun? Aren't they good?
With friends,
yeah. And I guess maybe it was the atmosphere a little bit, but you need that kind of atmosphere. You need people to be into the idea of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But all you're doing is, okay, just to actually explain the game, all you're doing is you have some betting chips, right? So you have a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5 at the beginning of the game. You'll get sort of a little bit more as you go along, maybe, because there are various, there's 4 rounds, and each round you get like a new ability, effectively. And there are places that you can put your bets on in real time as the horse race goes on, right? So you can place on a horse to win, you know, you can place on a horse to place, and you can place on a horse to show, right? So if you're placing on a horse to show, if it comes in third, second, or first, you're going to get money out of it. If placed, you know, second or first, you get money out of it. And if you're placing it on winning,
it needs to come first.
Yeah, it needs to come first. And obviously, the multipliers on those spaces are much bigger the more risk you take. But also, the way the horses move are determined by a roll of 2d6 dice. And each horse has a number. So, for example, number 7 will move every time you roll 7 on the dice. So it's a lot more likely to win.
Yeah.
But other horses have this strange catch-up mechanism. So horse number 2 and 3 is the same horse, first of all. So 2 and 3 will always move that horse. And same for 11 and 12. 11 and 12 will always move that horse. But also, if you roll 11, let's say, and you roll 12 again, right? If that horse moves twice in a row, it gets a bonus of free movement, which the bonus decreases based on the frequency of the chance of that die combination coming out. So number 8 does get that bonus, but it only moves a bonus of 1 if 8 comes out again, whereas 7 doesn't get that bonus at all, right? 7 just gets the bonus of, you know, being 7. So oftentimes you are incentivized to make very risky bets because if suddenly you see, like, you know, 11 and 12 go ahead once and then 4 more times effectively, because, you know, it moves once and then plus 3 bonus movement, you know, it's 5 ahead of everyone else, and you're like, shall I bet? Shall I bet on number 12, right?
But the thing is, you can only bet on that specific space if no one else has bet on it, unless you have a special ability that lets you.
Yeah.
So you don't want to bid too late, or bet too late, because that spot might go. Other people are watching that television screen too.
Yeah.
And they're seeing what you're seeing, and they're thinking maybe what you're thinking. And so you want to get ahead of them as well, but you don't want to mess up and bet too early and get all your chips out, and then, oh no, you know, then suddenly number 11 or whatever speeds ahead. You know, what do you do now? You spent all your bets.
It is such a stressful feeling. Like, it is,
but in a good way.
But in a good way, yeah.
Because there's no real money involved.
No, there is no real money. But yeah, and there are certain spots that give you a penalty if you lose as well. So they actually subtract money. On my first round, not only did I not win anything, but I also got a bunch of penalties. But because I had no money, it didn't matter. Yeah. I was like,
you
well,
can't go below 0.
Yeah, I didn't win anything, but I've also lost a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Oh well. But then in the second round, I got like half of my entire game score, if not more, because I was like, okay, I see how this works. I'm gonna wait a little bit, but not too much, you know. And then I was banging the wall, right? Yeah.
It reminded me of, and I think I have said this in comparison with other board game horse racing games. But it reminded me the most of, do you know, at the seaside, there was like an electronic horse racing machine. Did you ever see that?
No, I didn't.
So it was physical horses, like tiny little plastic horses in like a dome. And they were all lined up together, and they're all different colours. And then you would pay 10 pence and you would bet on one of the horses. And number 1 came out the most, but would only pay you 10 pence back. Number 8 came out the least, but would pay you £1 if it won. So you were kind of weighing up which horse to bet on from that. So it was a seaside game. You know, it wasn't serious. It was only like 10 pence a bet.
I mean,
it reminds me of that.
This felt like a seaside game. You know, yeah,
yeah, a little bit.
But yeah, it's very emotional. Back to your point about the app, right? Yeah, I just would not recommend playing this without the app, because the way it works without the app is that one person either sits out and is just the announcer, right? And their job as the announcer is to roll 2 dice, move 1 horse on this tiny board, which you can't see as well as you can on the telly screen, right? And then roll 2 dice, move 1 horse, roll 2 dice, move. And then if you want to be a good host, you also are trying to do the job of the announcer, play everything up, which I mean, I guess that could be good, right? But I just don't think it's as good or as smooth as like this uncontrollable app that you can't do anything about. You just watch it roll dice and you start tearing your hair out, right?
I think if you found the right person to play that role who wanted to do it and was confident to do it, then it would still be fine. But if not, then definitely the app is better.
There is a variant in the rulebook for being the announcer and better, but
oh my gosh,
no, I just would never do that. That sounds too cumbersome.
Is that allowed? Like, you can't be the announcer and put a bet on a horse.
No, well, there's some like extra rules there to kind of, but it's not like you can control anything anyway. You all you're doing is rolling dice. It's out of your control.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So you can't like cheat or anything, but it looks very cumbersome because not only do you have to take care of like maintain this board, but also like place, but it's just too much, I'd say get the app. It's free. Get it on your telly. Have a bunch of friends over. If they like being loud and raucous and betting on things, you will have a blast. If they don't, they will hate this game.
Still to come, we have Mindspace, but first we have our interview with someone who has worked on over 100 published board games, Rob Daviau.
Delighted to welcome to the show Rob Daviau, who is a board game designer and, correct me if I'm wrong, a board game publisher too. He's designed such games as Betrayal at House on the Hill, and is also responsible for inventing this genre of legacy games and has designed or co-designed Risk Legacy, Pandemic Legacy, Betrayal Legacy, Seafall, and most recently Ticket to Ride Legacy. Rob, I wanted to invite you to the show to talk about legacy games, but first, as with all guests, I want to dig a little bit into your board gaming biography. Can you tell me a little bit about like your first experiences with games? What did you play as a kid? Is there anything in particular in your memory that sticks out?
I played a number of games when I was a kid, and they were kids' games. The hobby market at the time when I was growing up were Avalon Hill hex-based games, so like I wasn't going to be playing those. But I played the sort of classic American staples of, Candyland and Chutes and Ladders and Clue and Monopoly, and then whatever licensed games were kicking around in the 70s. I played a game called Uncle Wiggily, which I have a fond memory of. I suspect it's incredibly racist if I looked at it now. So I was always around playing games, little electronic games. I played Dark Tower when I was 10 or 11. I had other sorts of games, Simon and Merlin. Putting batteries in games was a big thing in the 70s. But I really fell in love with gaming through finding Dungeons and Dragons when I was 11. That was like, I can make a game, but it's a story, but I'm emotionally involved, and the rules have gaps in them that as a DM I fill in, and start thinking about games as a not someone else did the rules, but how do I make this work for my table? And at some level, that's what started me on the path to becoming a game designer.
Imagine I know nothing about board games. How would you explain the idea of legacy games to me?
Sure. If you know nothing about board games, this is an odd hobby of making a podcast about them, but I can work with it. I say we take the idea, I've taught, because I've done this before with people. Think of it as a television series. Most of the time when you play a board game and you put it away, next time you take it out, it completely starts over. Things will change in the game because there'll be random cards and random dice and different decisions, but the game itself stays the same. But a legacy game allows you to take some of the actions and choices you make in the first game and carry them through to the second, just like a TV show will pick up where the other one left off. And they're not huge changes, but you basically will play 6, 10, 12, 15 games. And at the end, you'll have a game that is unique to you and your group, and it'll tell a story. And, that's what makes it a legacy game. Now, normally, if I'm saying this to someone who really doesn't understand board games, I can watch their face and see if they're sort of getting it, or if they're just absolutely, that sounds very weird. that sounds very complicated, those sorts of things. And then we can talk about it from there.
So you are responsible for this idea, right?
Yeah.
You brought it to the world. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you ended up doing Risk Legacy? Because that was the first one. And what propelled you to design a game that can be modified by players? Was there a specific, like a germ of an idea, or was it a confluence of things?
Yeah, it's a long story, so I'll give you the short version. The short version is I was at a brainstorm for the game Clue, or Cluedo, as you probably know, and was just brainstorming all sorts of things. And at some point in the day, I said something jokingly about, I don't know why they keep inviting these people over for dinner. Someone always gets murdered, as if it was an ongoing sort of thing. And then they're like, well, let's try again. Oh no, someone else got murdered. It was kind of a throwaway line. But later that day, when we were doing a brainstorm about assumptions about a game, like for example, the game board goes in the middle of the table. The game board is accessible by all players. The game board starts unfolded. The game board is face up, right? Things that are so basically common that you don't even think about them, because sometimes there's a chance to change some of that, right? Like, what if the game board started folded and part of playing was unfolding it? And I just happened to say, whatever you do in one game doesn't affect the start of the next game. And I remember my boss was like, oh, hey, ooh. And, then I just spent the rest of the meeting thinking about that and thinking about video games and comic books and television and role-playing games and sort of serial discussion. And I turned it into a game called Clue: The Usual Suspects. Oh, not even a game, a pitch for Hasbro. And they were baffled and confused and shut it down real fast. And then, I don't know, sometime within the next year, I was working on a bunch of Risk ideas. And we had a bunch of ideas. And one was, oh, what if we did that continuing story thing that we were talking about for Clue? And I just ended up applying it to Risk, and that game died so many times, and I spent like a year and a half willing it into existence. And I really didn't know if it was going to be something where everyone went, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen, please don't do that again. Or if, like, I hope people would be like, oh, this is neat. And it turned out that, enough people think it's neat.
So it was ultimately a narrative thread that brought it about.
Yeah, there's two parts to it. It was a little bit of, some of the things you do in one game affect the next. Like in Risk, you put stickers down, like you might build a wall or a bunker or do things. But I discovered pretty early, if you give people stickers and tell them they can use them in a game, they will use them right away. And they're like, well, there's no more. I ran out. And so I was like, okay, we can't give you all the things at the beginning. What if there's little packets you can open, little envelopes or boxes that gives you more? So we keep handing them out in little batches so you don't use them all at once. And then, so I did that, and I'm like, well, how do you open these packets? I'm like, well, maybe when you do something or something happens in the game. And then I started thinking, well, now there needs to be a story that kind of ties all this together. So there's a reason you don't open it at the beginning. And so it ended up being two pillars, at least for me when I design them. The board in the game is going to change in some way, and it's going to tell a story at the same time. So it's not just mechanical changes. There's a narrative reason of why something happens.
So I know you're a part of a company called Restoration Games, which is a company that focuses on redesigning old games with modern design twists. Do you think there is a parallel between this idea of breathing new life into an old design and the idea of redesigning an existing game with legacy sensibilities?
I think so. It's how my brain works. Right, I said that I started with role-playing games, and in some sense, I'm always trying to tell a story. And when I was in college, and for about a year after, I thought I wanted to go into television as a writer. And I did a lot of sketch comedy, and I've done a lot of writing, and then I was an advertising copywriter. So I'm a storyteller by nature. My games tend to be experience-driven and narrative-driven. So if you give a game to me, most of the time, the way my brain works is I'm going to be trying to do something a little bit different, a little bit story driven. And so games I work on tend to feel the same because that's what designers do. So yes, I see a subtle parallel between a legacy game and restoring a game, because when we're restoring a game, what we say is we want it to be as good as you remember. Not as good as it was, as good as you remember. And memories are a tricky thing. When we did both Return to Dark Tower and Fireball Island, many people said, oh, it's nice, but it's much smaller than when I was a kid. And in fact, in both cases, it was much taller. But you're not a kid. And so if you remember the game, we ask a lot of people when we're working on it, like, what do you remember? What's your favorite part? How old were you? Like, and people tell these amazing stories of, I was, with my cousin and they came over and they had this game and we stayed up too late. And I remember we giggled. I'm like, do you remember anything about the game? They're like, not really, but I love it for this memory. And so we're trying to pull all these memories, look for common threads. And then when we design the game, say, how do we evoke these feelings in people through, game mechanisms and design?
It was fascinating exploring Return to Dark Tower for me, because I grew up in the Soviets, right? And the idea of something like Return to Dark Tower just seems outrageous, in the time when I was a kid. Which, I mean, it wouldn't have been in the time when I was a kid because it was released just before I was born. But it was fascinating exploring it from a perspective of like, I don't know what this is. I better look it up. And so then when I saw like how the original Dark Tower looks and how it plays, I was like, this is so much more advanced. It's ridiculous,
I just wanted to acknowledge it because we thought about that a lot. Dark Tower was cutting edge for its time. It handled battle. It knew how many warriors you had. It knew which keys you had found. It knew which kingdom you were in. That was amazing for 1981, 1982, whatever it was in there. So we had to do something with ours that felt like it was on the cutting edge of what a board game could do, just like the original did. And it took us like maybe 2 years to figure out what that was. We had a lot of ideas that did not work at all.
Risk Legacy was the first Legacy game, and it was pretty well received. But Pandemic Legacy was critically and commercially triumphant, right? Did you get a sense when designing it that it would create this movement with many other designers adapting this idea?
No one is more surprised than I am that this silly little idea caught on, and I'm very happy that it did. I think what happened was I did Risk Legacy, which doesn't have a strong narrative. It's got a series of tropey things that you can kind of open in various orders. And then I was working on Seafall, so I had given a little bit more thought to the genre. But then when Matt came in, he and I worked very well together. He was the one who said we should have like a deck of cards that tells a more prescribed story. I was like, yeah, that's great. Let's do that. And the only indication that I had that it might do well was it was work, but it was easy work, right? Almost always. And it happened in season 2 and season 0 when I was working on that, but not in season 1. Almost always you just drive a game into a ditch and you're like, how did I get here? How do I fix it? And it just didn't happen. Like it went quickly. It went smoothly. All the playtesters liked it. People were like, this is really cool. And I went, okay, so either this is going to be great or we missed something obvious because it shouldn't have gone this smoothly. And it turned out it just, right people at the right time, I guess.
That's always the scariest, isn't it? When things are just working and you don't know if it's just, is this complete rubbish or like, am I onto something? And there's just no way of knowing until you put it out.
Oh, yeah. A board game gets play tested more in the first 2 days after it's released than its entire development. And then you see what you missed.
I'm glad you mentioned Seafall. I don't want to hover too much on it. But so you did Seafall, and you were also working on a more elaborate game called Origins that I believe that never eventually came out. I mentioned these because I think it would be interesting to hear what you think doesn't necessarily always work in legacy games and why. Like, what are the experiences that don't lend themselves well to this system?
Well, I think you need a world or people or characters to tell a story around personally. Otherwise, other people can disagree, but for me, otherwise there's nothing for people to hook onto. Seafall didn't do that well for a variety of reasons. Mostly the analogy my wife gave, which I like, is when the Beatles broke up, George Harrison released a triple album to get a lot of things out of his system. And Seafall was my triple album, right? It had too many ideas and I hadn't learned to edit for myself yet because I used to have people at Hasbro like, this is too much, right? I was kind of going solo and wanted to prove to people like I can do more than, Monopoly license games. There should have been an editing pass downstream with the publisher, but Plaid had been bought by Z-Man, and there was just a lot of internal things going on there where they didn't have the brain space to do it. So it ended up it missed an editing pass. But things I learned about it is I needed to remember that people might not play this game for months between like chapter 4 and chapter 5. And there's no recap of what happened. And you need a reason after game 1 to want to play game 2. And I think Seafall has too many mechanisms going on. But also I think the narrative, I was trying to do like a Lord of the Rings, like, it takes them forever to leave the Shire. I wanted to like build this very slow story that got bigger and bigger. And I just think with a board game, you want to play the first one and go, oh, I want to play that again. And it was short and you understood it. And then 2 months go by and you come back and you go, I remember what's going on. So one lesson I learned is it has to be a little bit more of a summer blockbuster. Like the story needs to be a little more straightforward, I think. I've had more success when people are like, I get it. I know what's happening. I haven't played in a couple months. Like people go, what's going on? You're like, there was this thing. So like, not that the bad guy needs to like wear a black hat and twirl his mustache, but you kind of need to know if there's a bad person. Like that's a bad person, and the bad person's trying. Like it needs to be very understandable. And Seafall had a dense story that was very subtle and built over time, and had a lot of mechanisms. And Origins, until you said, I'm like, what are you talking about? I had completely forgotten that idea had existed, and I spent a bunch of time. Yeah, that was the idea of Dirk Niemeyer. He was with Artana. I think he sold the company. And it was really a case of, it was so big, I'm not sure how anyone could get it done, but ultimately Dirk like sort of cleaner, more elegant games, and I like games that were more narrative and had some more stuff to them. And I would have an idea for a prototype and he wouldn't like it. He'd have a prototype and I wouldn't like it. So eventually like, oh, we just see different things for games. And I said, do what you want. And I think it just collapsed under the size of the idea.
I don't know what it says about me. I own 2 copies of that George Harrison album on vinyl. I've just been to Essen Spiel, and one of the big changes I've seen this year in board game publishing is a push towards more sustainable productions. Publishers are like opting to reduce plastic, including wrapping cards in paper rather than shrink wrap, using FSC certified paper, new wood molding techniques. Is there a more sustainable future for legacy games? Is this something you are actively thinking about?
Well, I try to be more sustainable in a number of ways with the games. It's a weird thing you put, especially if on Kickstarter, if you put plastic figures up there, you make like 3 times as much money.
Yeah.
So, but you're also like not really being environmentally conscious. But you can do things like make the figures out of recycled plastic. Even if they're more expensive, to like at least not be introducing new plastic into the world. It's something we talk about with restoration. We talk about it for legacy games. It's tricky because a lot of the price of a legacy game is hiding things. So you end up with extra waste. And so like one thing that like in Ticket to Ride Legacy out soon, instead of wrapping everything individually where you have packaging, we just have a big brick of cards that are numbered and we tell you to go get cards out of it. It was something that I did in Betrayal Legacy as well. Like, here's a deck. We're not going to make 10 packets with 4 cards each. We're going to make 40 cards and we're just going to say, go get card 24. Right. And so there's little things, but it's tricky.
I can imagine it is. Yeah. So Ticket to Ride Legacy is releasing now. What have people, new and seasoned to Legacy games, got to look forward to?
For Ticket to Ride, well, it's a Ticket to Ride game. And 3 egotistical designers all working together. Actually, we're all pretty chill. If you like Ticket to Ride, I think you'll like it. The story is there. It's not as narratively driven as some other ones. It's much more casual, I think. Just Ticket to Ride is a casual game. We wanted to have a slightly wider audience. One of the things that I do like about it is, and it's tricky to explain, well, it's not really spoilers. When you open up the game, you can see that the map is just the east coast of the US, and it's an uncompleted puzzle. It's not a big leap to realize you're going to find more pieces of the US as you play, but the order that you get them, that you find them, will shape the feel and flow of your game. Whereas if you played the campaign again and did it in a different order, it would feel a little different, which I find fascinating and I like.
Rob, thank you so very much for being on the show. I look forward to trying Ticket to Ride Legacy. and I hope it does really well.
Thank you for having me.
So after we recorded this interview, you've told me that his name might not be pronounced Daviau.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if I was pronouncing it as French, I would pronounce it Daviau.
Okay.
Right? But on the website, on the BGG, his page on BGG, it says it's pronounced Daviau. So I don't quite know how to pronounce that.
Maybe it's just like still slightly Americanized for people who
knows?
can't pronounce French things like myself. But yeah, apologies to Rob for mispronouncing your
I
name.
probably mispronounced loads of names.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, should we move on? Let's talk about our last game of the episode. Mindspace comes from publisher Allplay by designer Nao Shimamura with art by Julianne Griep.
Well, you say publisher Allplay, but their name used to be BoardGameTables.com.
Okay, but that's not their name anymore.
I know. I just find it so funny when like your brand name has a .com in it. There's a reason they changed it, right?
Why?
Because they had a .com in it, so they changed it to Allplay.
.com.
No, it's not .com anymore. Yeah,
No.
which makes a lot more sense. But I don't know. It just always cracks me up. Do you know what doesn't crack me up? Allplay's rule books. Oh my god. Ugh.
When I read the rules to Mindspace, I was like, well, okay, the rules aren't really complete on what everything does, but okay, I'll figure it out from the example. There is a pretty solid example that it gives for scoring. So okay, I can work it out from that. So I worked it out from that, then turned over my brain board that you draw on, and lo and behold, on the back of that is the actual rules for what everything does. But the first thing the rulebook says is like, place your brain board in front of you. So and then you go through the rest of the rules, not knowing if you haven't scouted through the box.
What is wrong with that? Okay,
where these rules are.
Allplay, if you're listening, here's the thing, right? I know that publishers have this conversation a lot, and I know that amongst you there is this talking point of that, like, oh, the number one barrier for like people wanting to buy a board game is the idea of reading a rule book. You're not making a rule book for someone who hasn't purchased the board game yet. You're making it for someone who has, right? If a person doesn't want to buy a board game because they don't want to read a rule book, guess what they're not going to do? They're not going to buy a board game. They are not your customers. Your customers are people who buy board games, who invite people and want to teach them. And for them to teach games effectively and get people into games, they need to have a good rule book so that they can teach the games.
For those of you listening at home, Efka is now waving his arms around.
I am. Please stop it. Stop it now. Stop it with the terrible rule books. You can't make them small and not include rules and still have them be good. Please stop it.
I mean, it was this one was fine. It was fine. Once I'd realised the rules were actually on the back of the game brain board, it was fine. But I get what you mean. Yeah, like
yes.
it is a problem when rule books are so obtuse.
Yes. Okay. So, having that minor rant aside, I enjoyed Mindspace. It was a nice roll and write.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're talking about it really, because there's so many roll and writes out there, but it did feel like this one did something a little bit not so different that it's not a roll. It's still a roll and write. If you don't like roll and writes,
You're not gonna like this.
you're not gonna like this.
If you don't like fitting Tetris pieces into a brain shape.
Yeah, you're also not going to like this.
No.
But if you like roll and writes, this was a nice one. I really quite enjoyed it. And it had this very clever moment, which I'm going to describe as soon as I describe how you play this game. So in Mindspace, you have a bunch of Tetris shapes that you need to draw into a brain. But the shapes are of different colors. However, the shape and color isn't determined until the turn where you actually have to place it. And the way that works is that you have this carousel of 6 cards that all represent different polyomino shapes, and they're numbered 1 through 6. And then you roll a bunch of dice that have colors on them, right? And these dice then go onto these certain cards based on the numbers and on the die color and all of that, right? And so suddenly this like L shape becomes blue, whereas it might have not been available the previous round and been pink the round before that, right? and this carousel keeps moving one space over every round, and thus new shapes enter and older shapes disappear.
And the dice are rolled every round too,
Yeah. So colors change all the time. Now, why is that important? Well, first of all, you can't draw a like color next to a like color. So you have these like sections of the brain, which are not like named. They're not like the amygdala or whatever, right? Or the hippocampus. They're just
No.
vague blocks, right? And
It does have blocked off bits in it too, like holes that you can't colour in at all.
yes.
And I've seen a picture of my brain, and I do have holes like that, so that makes sense.
Funny.
Nice bit of representation. I don't know what they're called in the game, honestly, but yeah, I like that.
So you can't draw light color next to light color, but you also kind of like get various bonuses based on what color the shape is that you're drawing. So there's one color, I can't remember what it is, where you want to draw like an opposite inverted next to it, or somewhere else. Some want to be next to it, some just want to have a duplicate. There's various reasons to draw various colors.
It's thematic too, according to the game, because like the two that you want an exact copy is pink, right? And it's like romance, because you want to find your shape that goes with you. It's that kind of
That's
kind of theming.
stretching it.
I know. Well, all of it's stretching it, but they've all like, I don't know, orange is friendship and blue is music or something like this. And you want to have orange and blue next to each other because music is better with friends. Like it's that kind of theming.
Yeah, so talking of stretching, the brain looks stretched as well, right? Like there's this, it's not, like it's a square shape effectively, but the way they've drawn it, like the diameters skew, if that makes sense.
I don't think it's an accurate representation, pictorial representation of a brain.
No, definitely, yeah. But yeah, it was fun. So the one clever bit that I found is that oftentimes you will need like the same shape but in a different color.
Yes.
Right? Because that benefits you. And so if you draw one shape, you know that shape will likely come again based on how far up it is on the carousel. If it just entered, there's a good chance you're going to roll the die and it'll go on that card and it might be the same color, or maybe it'll be a different color. And so every time you're kind of drawing something, you're effectively taking a risk on whether you're going to get good access to that shape again, because it's a die roll, so you don't know, right? And so there's this constant feeling of just, waiting for the die roll to be exactly what you want to. But then you're waiting for another shape, and you're waiting for another shape, and some shapes leave, and when they leave, they're not going to come back, right?
Individual cards.
Yeah. So it's very crunchy in that way, but it also incentivizes you to like fill in each area as much as possible. So there is that kind of like, do I draw smaller shapes? Do I draw bigger shapes? It's spunky what they've done with shapes. I didn't know so many things could be done with shapes, but Mindspace somehow made it pleasant. I enjoyed it.
Sorry, having just looked at it, the rules are on the back of the scoreboard, not your brain board.
It's on the back of the board. I get it.
Yeah. I don't want to be,
Yeah, clarity is important.
Oh, purple is music too. We didn't get this right at all.
Well, that's the thing. We also didn't mention, so there's like end of game scoring goals. If you manage to achieve this and you're the first person to achieve this, like you cobbled some shape together or whatever, right? Or a number of like a certain color, you'll get points. It's very derivative as a roll-in, right? It's not doing anything we haven't seen like Welcome to or Railroad Inc. do. It's almost like a combination of Railroad Inc. and
that's high praise coming from you.
Well, I mean, nothing beats Railroad Inc., right? Period. But almost like a combination of Welcome to and Railroad Inc., but not as exciting as either of those, I would say. But not exciting. I like playing this for like a very quick one. I think this is one of the better ones, and definitely an enjoyable one, clever. It's just not, there's nothing about Mindspace that made me go, ooh, this is like cool,
you're right. No, it's not gonna blow your mind. You see what I did there? No, I really like the graphic design of this, the artwork and the graphic design of this. It's very pleasing to look at because there's lots of different colours because you're colouring in this board, right?
Yeah.
But somehow they all fit together really well, and I just found it very pleasing and calming.
Yes, it is. And the other thing that I liked is, so this is a bonus and a negative at the same time. So you get markers, but they're all different colors, right? And normally
Why
in a
is
roll.
that negative?
Let me finish.
Okay, sorry.
Normally in a roll and write, you get like just black markers, and this is nice and colorful, and like, you know, I don't know. There's something quite pleasing about having markers of different colors. Also, when they run out, you haven't got those color. You have to.
Well,
yeah.
all right.
This isn't something I brought up. This is something I heard Tom Vassell say on his review.
Well, I'm sure Tom Vassell has
Mindspace.
access to purchase some coloured markers.
But exactly those colors. This
but they
orange.
no, it doesn't have to be exactly
pink.
those. It doesn't matter, does it? As long as they're roughly orange, roughly pink, roughly green.
There, Tom Vassell, you are wrong apparently, according to Elaine from No Pun Included.
Well, I mean, really, what a funny little nitpick. Like, what if your black marker runs out? What are you going to do then? Oh, you'd have to buy another one, wouldn't you? Or nick one from another game. Oh, all right then, that's fine. But not if they're coloured. Oh, no. That's completely different. That's like a big negative of the game. What?
Calm down now.
Sorry.
We apparently each get one rant for an all-play game.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
I'm not ranting about... That's the thing. I'm not ranting about the game.
Okay.
I'm ranting
okay.
about that as a criticism of the game.
All right. Okay.
But I'm not ranting about Tom Vassell. Just to clarify.
Dig your own hole.
An excellent board game reviewer. I just found this very cute, very cosy, pleasant to play, a solid game, a solid roll and write. Like you said, doesn't do anything life altering, but lovely just to sit down, colour in some squares on a brain. Nice. That's all the games. If you have anything to say about any of them, don't forget to drop me an email, elaine@nopunincluded.com, or if you have any general questions or comments. Rich writes in to say, I've enjoyed your podcast and YouTube videos for a really long time. You are always good at presenting what you liked and disliked about the games you review. I would love to learn your all-time favourites, as in your favourite game mechanics, favourite rulebook, favourite artwork, favourite packaging, favourite coins, favourite minis, etc. I would also hope to learn what made each of these your favourite. You could even present your answers like an award show, i.e. Oscars.
Wow. Thank you for the suggestion, Rich. We don't really do favorites much. So yeah, sadly you're out of luck there. It sounds fun, but our only concession to this sort of like award or whatever thing is we do a Game of the Year video each year at the end of the year. So you'll know what our favorite game of the year was that year. We also did a few things at the beginning of the year on Talk Cardboard, like our most anticipated games. So maybe expect a bit more of that, but not too much, because we don't tend to lean into that sort of thing. We just like to review games.
Our opinions change too much.
Yes, we can't set them in stone, because then they're in stone and we can't change them, and that's inconvenient.
Yeah, people will say, but you said this was your favourite game.
It's not anymore, sorry.
Thank you so much for your comments, and thank you for listening. And finally, Efka, what is on the bonus episode this week, and what is the game of the episode?
On the bonus episode, which you can get access to by becoming a No Pun Included patron on patreon.com/NoPunIncluded, where you give us a bit of money each month and you help us keep going and get a bonus episode every time a main episode comes out of this Talk Cardboard podcast, is
Zoo Vardis, Savage Bowl, and Bonanza.
Whoa, 3 games?
3 games. It's always 3 games on the bonus, mostly.
No, it's sometimes just 2. 3 games this time.
Yeah.
A lot. It's nice. The game of the episode is Ready, Set, Bet. I think that's pretty much a given. We enjoyed that the most, didn't we? Mm-hmm. And with that, why don't you say goodbye, Elaine?
Goodbye, Elaine.
Goodbye, Elaine.